I want to tell you for a few minutes about the work we've done in new business models for news. At CUNY, like everyone, we listen to the conversation about the business future of news, and what we hear is a lot of mourning and whining. And I've had people actually say to me, you know, Jarvis, what happens when your internet, thank you very much, kills the paper? So we decided to look at that. And it's a bit controversial because I don't want to kill papers. I love papers. My basement is filled with my clips my wife can't stand. I'm a romantic about papers. But people like horses too. Things change. What we have to teach more than anything else is change. So we wanted to get specifics in this discussion rather than generalisms. And so we looked at what would happen in a market of 5 million people, which for us is a large market, but only a fraction of the country. In other countries, it's the whole country, and I'm aware of that. But it's about the size of Boston. What happens if the Boston Globe folded? And at the time we started this, it was looking like it might, because the New York Times was going to abandon the child, no one else was going to buy it. So fine, let's face the devil. What would happen if the Boston Globe folded? And a few things became apparent to us. One is that it's not as if the big old company is replaced by a big new company. Instead, what we see already emerging is an ecosystem of many different players operating under many different motives and means and business models. And so we then did research on that. And we talked to hyperlocal bloggers scattered across the country. And it's not as if they're all like this, but we found bloggers here and there who are bringing in today, covering markets of 50,000 people. They're bringing in $200,000 revenue. And mind you, these are journalists who don't know shit about business or sales or advertising. Kind of in spite of themselves, they're making a living. They're making a sustainable journalistic enterprise. And so then we asked, what would it take to optimize that, to make that better? And we have two answers. The first is to try to improve what they sell. The second is to create networks. The idea of just selling banners and buttons to local advertisers isn't going to work. We have to ask what those advertisers want. So we at CUNY are out right now doing research with local advertisers in Brooklyn. We, a journalism school, are researching advertising because we want to pay for the journalists. We're working with the New York Times. The New York Times started the blog The Local. We did it together as a joint venture in Brooklyn, and the New York Times couldn't afford to have a full-time staffer on it anymore, so we took it over at the school. We now run The Local. My friend and colleague and competitor, Jay Rosen, now has a version of The Local in the East Village in Manhattan, and there are a few others around the country. So we run The Local, and what became apparent at The Local is to get into the business model, it's got to operate in an ecosystem and network with bloggers, and to make them succeed, they've got to find a way to get paid. And to make that work, we believe in our modeling that they have to work in networks. So we're doing research now with local advertisers to see what is it that they want and need, and then we are going to try to do training of new people, citizen sales. We've heard about citizen journalism, well, how about citizen sales? How about new sales forces of people who can sell in new ways? This is all absolutely unproven. We don't know what's going to work, but if you start with this basis of $200,000 a year that we know bloggers can make today, we think they could get $350. And again, in this hypothetical market, there's also no major paper for the whole market, so there's money there to be had as well, if you can get things into networks. The key is that a given blogger can't walk into a major retailer and say, give me the ad, because they're too small. The retailer can't deal with 100 of these. But if someone walks in and says, I have the best 50, here they are at once, the retailer is probably going to say, okay, especially because the price is better than they were used to paying. Mark Potts, who started Backfence, is now working on a company called Growth Spur that is going to attempt to start these networks and train these new sales forces. Michael Rosenblum, who some of you may know has brought one-man bands into the journalism market in video, is also working on a means to do this in video. There are nascent efforts here, but I think we desperately need the networks. So we did this research looking at what the bloggers world looks like. We looked at a new news organization. We still believe it exists in a market like this. In fact, before we did it, it ends up looking a lot like TBD. Jim Brady starting in Washington. It has a couple dozen journalists, it has 40, 50 staff, it sells the ads for this network. It's a business, but it's a smaller business. That I think we projected as a $20 million business. The Boston Globe last year brought in $400 million revenue. But it's profitable. That's the key. In business, we keep looking at not the bottom line, but the top line. We keep on looking at the size. How big is it? That's not the way to manage business anymore. I think that's true across many industries, that innovation is going to lead to efficiency more than growth. And so we saw this idea that's a book I want to write, but I'm not an economist, so I'm not qualified to. I might do it anyway, because what economists know. So we saw that there were sustainable, profitable enterprises in this market, and then we added it all up at the end. At the end, we saw that there was about $45 million revenue that we believed was credible. And that's also credible from the other end, is that that's about, newspapers are getting in between 8 and 12 and 15% of their revenue digitally. So just for the Globe alone, and it shows incredible potential for growth. That sustained about 250 full-time equivalent content people, AKA journalists, versus, I don't know what that market has, 300, 350 in the newsroom. It's an equivalent number, and as I said before, it's a very different relationship with the public, far closer to the community, far more answerable and accountable to the community, not doing repetitive news, commodity news, production. So I could argue that we may actually improve journalism this way. But as Clay Shirky says, that's the other rule of conferences, you must quote Clay Shirky once in every talk, because he's so quotable. And I say this with great respect. Clay says, everything will work and nothing will work. We don't know. Nothing may work. It's true. There's no guarantee here. I offer no guarantees. But I'm optimistic that society will show a demand for quality journalism. And if that's the case, the next question is, can we meet that demand? Can the market meet that demand? And that's what we try to do in our research. We tried to say, this is what we think is possible. And by the way, there's huge growth to be had here, because we, in the numbers that we ran, projected, I think, 12 page views per user per month, which is very typical for news sites in America. 12 per user per month. Facebook gets 12 per user per day. Go back to what Mark Zuckerberg said about bringing elegant organization to a community, truly being part of that community, truly help that community do what it wants to do. If we in journalism truly did that, we'd be closer to Facebook's numbers than newspapers' numbers. Because we don't think of ourselves as a platform. We think of ourselves as making content. Well, that may not be what we do. So I want to end here going through what I think the impact of all this is on what we do, both as journalists and as journalism educators. I don't think we've pushed nearly far enough in rethinking the form and the structure of what journalism is. I'm going to talk about this more this afternoon. They're overworking me today. I'm going to be very sick of myself if I'm not already. So I wish I could be here all day, and I can't. But a quick preview of what that is. I think there's a few places where I start looking at what I think the future of news looks like, and I don't go far enough. I want my students to surprise me and really rethink what this is in broad ways. Some of the things we were already talking about, of course, is journalism as more of a process than a product. It was a product because we had to make it on the press or on the TV show. That's the way it operated. Properly, journalism is far more of a process. I said before, we have to operate collaboratively and in networks. That's the key to efficiency and to saving money and to being more of the community and to being more aware and to be more helpful. I think if you look at some place like Google, they see content everywhere. And we think content is what we make.